Good afternoon. Welcome to the New Haven Museum. I'm Margaret Ann Tarkaszewski, Executive Director, and it's great to have everybody here this afternoon for Long Wharf's Theater, A Legacy in Moments, a celebration of nationally renowned theater photographer T. Charles Erickson. And to welcome theater journalist Frank Rizzo as well. Since May, we have delighted in visitors who have accepted Long Wharf's invitation to engage with 60 years of their history. And this extraordinary exhibition and Mr. Erickson's extraordinary photographs have truly enlivened the museum's rotunda and galleries. For some guests, it's been a trip down memory lane as they recall the many productions that have spoken to them throughout their lives. For others, it's been an introduction to Long Wharf Theater as it launches a new era, moving out into the city and sparking interest, creativity, and participation in exciting and unexpected ways. The museum is delighted in this opportunity to partner with the Long Wharf family because they are strongly aligned with our vision to foster community and conversation. In addition to public programs this fall, the theater and the museum are partnering on school programs, and students and teachers are experiencing the city's history in completely different ways. For that, we're grateful, in particular to Jessica Durdock Moreno, Director of Artistic Planning, and the exhibition's curator, who some of you already met today on a tour earlier. So a big hand to Jessica. She's been a tremendous partner. Moderating today's conversation will be Long Wharf Theater's Artistic Director, Jacob G. Perdone, who has served in his role since 2019. Jacob has guided Long Wharf through a transition and reinvention of its producing model, leaving its longtime theater venue and expanding its reach to serve New Haven's diverse communities as an itinerant company presenting work across 26 venues in 7 cities. Long Wharf received a $1 million Mellon Foundation grant under Jacob's leadership to advance equity in artistic programming, and Jacob was named the Person of the Year by the National Theater Conference. He's been an inspiring cultural leader here in New Haven, and we are grateful for our partnership with Jacob and his team. So, welcome.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you guys want to have a seat, Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to honor this extraordinary artist and another amazing artist. I feel like you are an artist in many ways, yes. But thank you all so much for being here. So yes, my name is Jacob Padron, and I'm going to just read so that way I don't forget anything. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a truly special occasion. My name is Jacob Padron. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the honor of being the artistic director for Long Wharf Theater. I am excited to share that we are very much in our season, in our 61st season, and we have 2 upcoming productions that we want to share. The first is Sanaz Tusi's Pulitzer Prize-winning play English, which will be performed at the Southern Connecticut State University in January. And then, y'all, some of you may have seen our production of A View from the Bridge at the Canal Dock Boathouse. Yes. And we will be back. Thanks to our incredible partnership with the City of New Haven, we're now going to be doing August Wilson's masterpiece, Gem of the Ocean, in February. So please, please, please get your tickets now. Do not delay. But I hope that A View from the Bridge and some of the other shows that you've seen across the city is a testament, really, to what is possible when we lead with courage and imagination in terms of transforming and activating these spaces. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering today on the unceded territory of the Paugussett, Quinnipiac, and Wappinger peoples. And today we have the incredible honor of celebrating someone whose impact on the American theater is unmistakable and indelibly massive. From thousands upon thousands of contact sheets and files to scores and scores of productions across the country to an unfathomable number of camera clicks, T. Charles Erickson has captured some of the most iconic performances on American theater stages for nearly half a century. And 40 of those decades were for Long Wharf Theater. Yes. But Charlie's contributions to Long Wharf Theater and the American theater is not simply one of having preserved the beautiful, shocking, powerful, and delightful moments manifested out of the alchemy of actors, directors, writers, designers, and technicians who create any given performance, which you can see in the Longworth Theater retrospective just outside these ballroom doors. Theater is ephemeral. No single performance can ever be repeated except for the memory of it. Some might say that a show is lost on closing night. Yet through his photos, Charlie has not simply left us with a souvenir from people and places and performances of the past. Charlie's impact on us, yes, not just on the theater industry, but on the theater people, is that he has single-handedly shaped how generations will not only remember the epic moments between iconic theater makers that unfolded on our stages, but how those who will come after us might relive those moments again and again and again in the future and forever. In some ways, the keeper of the memory of the American theater, of Longworth Theater, is the archive of photos by the photographer whose instinctual impulses, honed craft, and artistic virtuosity are unparalleled. This is the legacy of T. Charles Erickson, a legacy in moments, a legacy that has shaped how we remember and relive a Longworth Theater's own legacy for generations to come. Okay, now I want to tell you a little bit more about these two humans who I am sitting next to. So please bear with me because they've accomplished a lot in their lives. But I want to actually take the time that this moment deserves in terms of reading a little bit more about their accomplishments because they're extraordinary. And both these individuals have had a real impact on my life and the American theater and certainly on the history of Longworth. Okay, so a little bit more about T. Charles Erickson. He is a nationally known theater photographer recognized for his captivating and dynamic images of stage productions. Born in Madison, Wisconsin, Erickson developed a passion for photography at a young age. He attended the University of Massachusetts, graduated as an alumni scholar in art history in 1979. Erickson's career as a theater photographer began in the early 1980s when he started capturing images of performances in and around New Haven, where he was employed as the Yale University photographer from 1981 to 1987. His distinctive style and ability to capture the essence of live theater quickly gained recognition within the industry. With his keen eye for composition and lighting, Erickson's photographs captures the energy, emotion, and intricacies of stage performance. He has a talent for freezing moments that convey the essence of a production, from powerful acting moments revealing deep emotional presence to visually stunning set designs and costumes. Erickson's images have been featured countless times by the New York Times at a rare but all unequaled, at a rate all but unparalleled by any non-staffer and in most national newspapers. He has been the subject of profiles for the New York Times, the Hartford Courant, the New Haven Register, and American Theater, as well as CPTV documentary and the American Theater Wings In the Wings series on theater artists. T. Charles Erickson's photographs have received critical acclaim and have been exhibited in galleries and in the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture and the Wadsworth Atheneum. His contributions to the theater industry have earned him respect and admiration from actors, directors, and fellow photographers alike. Too numerous to name, he has photographed countless productions for Broadway, off-Broadway, regional theater, and beyond. Whew, okay, yes. And he's still working. Excellent. Okay, Frank Rizzo has covered Connecticut theater for nearly 50 years, mostly for the Hartford Courant and the Times Mirror syndicate of newspapers. As a freelance writer, Frizzo has covered Broadway for Variety for 22 years, as well as written for outlets including the New York Times, Playbill, American Theater Magazine, Connecticut Magazine, and Hearst newspapers. He is a speaker on theater, the art of reviewing and interviewing celebrities at venues such as the University of Hartford, the Mark Twain House, and UConn. His stories can be found on showriz.com, and he lives in New Haven and New York City. Please give it up for these two remarkable individuals. Okay. Excellent. So again, thank you all so much for being here as we honor our friend. So in preparation for this conversation, Charlie had a vision, and his vision that he wanted to start with sharing some photographs to share more about his life and his journey and where he comes from as a way into this conversation. So Charlie, take it away.
Thank you. You can all hear me, I suspect. Okay. We're going to just jump in here and won't waste any extra time, but what you're about to see, if this works, yes, this is the very first photograph that I ever took. I remember very distinctly this moment, and I remember being in the station wagon bumping down the dirt road in Nantucket, and I picked up this camera, this thing that my mom used to wave around, and I said, "What's this thing do?" And the next thing I knew, that car stopped. That camera was grabbed out of my hand. I said, "Oh, those things are interesting." I did not see that picture until I was 30 years old. That picture was among the effects that were found after my mother died in '95. So there we go. Now this is my world growing up. I had the hungriest eyes that were ever devised. There was nothing that I did not want to look at, scan, read, whatever. I cannot sit here and look at the sky. I must be reading. And as far as that goes, I read every comic book that was ever written. These graphics, let's remember, I grew up in a world that was black and white. Y'all, most of you, I can look around, a lot of you guys know about black and white life. This is black and white life. Only comic books had color. Only Time Life magazine books had color. Now, the greatest influence that steered me in the direction of theater was growing up in a very dramatic environment. This is a very theatrical person. It's my mom. And Mom wanted to be an actor. Yeah, this was the look when they said we ran out of sugar, ma'am. Emmy was the delight of thousands of students. She was the most curious person you ever met in your life, completely tolerant of everything, curious and interested in absolutely everything. But she did harbor the desire to be a starlet. And her mom gave her 2 years to make it in New York, and the war broke out, and she went to work instead. She went to work at Brearley as an English teacher. So that's what I grew up in, was in the English teacher's world. Things were very exacting, and communication was very distinct. Her tastes in art ran to the familiar, which I repeated when I started to photograph. I was influenced by what I saw. So that was my impressionism. What was I seeing more often than anything else? Magazines. Remember magazines? They used to make like 10,000 of them every 2 days. And Mom's tables were stacked with them. So I saw the greatest photographers that worked in the 20th century constantly feeding me fabulous, elegant, wonderful photographs. And when I found my second roll of film that I ever shot, that picture was in the middle of it. I took that when I was 9 years old. Something interesting was happening. I continued to carry, I graduated from the $9 plastic camera to a $14 Instamatic, which I put in my army jacket when I headed off to Woodstock. And on Monday morning, August 18th, 1969, as Jimi Hendrix was in the middle of the Star-Spangled Banner, Charlie took this picture with his $14 camera. So you might say that's where it started. Maybe that's where the performance thing started. In the time, back in the day, you could take your camera where you wanted to. This stuck with me. So every time I went to a concert from then on, and as my cameras and equipment got better, I got better opportunities. Shortly after I took this absolutely insanely close photograph of Bob Marley, who was inconveniently close to me, they started to shut down the whole thing with photography. It was like 3 songs and you're out of here. So I took advantage of it when it was easy and free. The other thing I did with my personal life was to photograph what's around you, right? So nature happened to be around me. Old Lyme is one of the more beautiful places you're ever going to find yourself. And these were the kinds of things that I would do. Now, nature always pulled, and I invested in a long lens with the money I earned from my alumni scholars thing. And I bought a telephoto lens, and I took this picture in Wyoming. one summer in '77. And I became a winner of the Boston Globe Photo Contest. So that raised my profile and my confidence. And I continued working. Generally, my work was Kodachrome because you took it to the store and picked up the boxes. I didn't have a darkroom then. So I'm shooting color. And I'm very interested in experimentation. I'm doing double exposures. I'm learning how to do stuff. And surprising myself. So sooner or later, I became more involved with performance because I met my partner of 23 years, Jenny Lester, and she was a dancer. And she became a dancer with the Connecticut Ballet. And this is one of the many pictures I did for Connecticut Ballet. They were the first company to pay me. My first professional gig was Nutcracker, 1978, $35. Then, in '81, I got hired by Yale. And this was because I managed a camera store and we met everybody who worked in Connecticut. When that camera store closed, I used those contacts to get closer and closer to, hey, they're hiring. And I went over and they hired me. And I was a wind-up toy at Yale. I did whatever they sent me out to do. So some days it looked like this, and some days I climbed a scaffold and I made a picture. And then some days I wandered around a corner and I found, what? What's this? And I found an art installation in the A&A. And I found the artist and got to talking. And that artist was very intriguing and very insistent. And before I knew it, I was working with her a lot. Kristen Jones, she's here in the room today. And Kristen's work was very theatrical. This stuff was impossible to photograph. The picture you're looking at has 7 separate exposures. 7, all built onto one frame of film. Ditto. We would go in the studio and play and make stuff. This ended up in Art Forum magazine. And because of that higher profile, I got tapped by all kinds of people. So suddenly, here I am hanging out with Robert Indiana with his sculpture because these things used to be made 20 minutes away from here. But theater is calling me, and I'm only theater adjacent at Yale. I'm not quite there yet. But one day I got a call from Rolling Stone, and they said, can you go photograph Christopher Walken? I said, yes. And he was very sweet when all my photo equipment failed. It was the 20 minutes before this, I learned what flop sweat was. Oh, my God. And he was very nice. So one day, Yale says, go down to dismal rehearsal space number 3999 at Yale and walk in there. And I walk in and I go, oh, my God, that's Athol Fugard. And oh, my God, that's Danny Glover. And oh, my God, that's Jake Smokai. And oh, my God, that's Željko Ivanek. And they're doing the very first read-through of Master Harold and the Boys. So I was riveted instantly. I had seen Sizwe Bansi is Dead in '76 in London and been totally transported. Athol Fugard was very definitely a name in my head. So I wandered around that table. I wasn't in that room for more than 15 minutes. Took these pictures. Athol found out about. He saw them, and he liked them. And Athol and I became friends. And when he came back to town, again, I'm not shooting shows yet, but I shot him. I'd say, can I do a portrait? Can I do something with you when you're here? And he would make the space. He'd make sure it happened. And we became buddies. And I still hadn't shot a damn play. And he's going, Charlie, you need to do this. You should be shooting theater. So I did. Within a year of that, I got my offer and my opportunity. It came from the marketing manager at the time, Marta Mellinger, who I saw one day at Atticus Cafe with another one of my clients. And I went over in a very cocky gesture, handed her my card. Remember, we had cards. If you're ever looking. And the phone rang 3 days later. She said, I'm not really getting along with my photographer. You want to bring me your portfolio? So I did. And the very first show I shot was this one. And you know what they say. History.
Yes. That show was Tobacco Road, right? Yes, in 1984.
The most realistic Depression-era show that could possibly have been devised. And Michael Jurgen, bless his heart, made this super, super realistic background that made my photographs look as though they had been drafted by the Farm Security Administration in the 30s. And they went everywhere, instant recognition. One show, a shot out of the box.
I'm looking at you, Charlie, but I'm not, because I'm really looking at Joanne Woodward right behind you and going back to that moment in the play. And that's what Charlie does so well. Nowadays, you could go online and see clips of shows. Sometimes you can see the entire show. But what Charlie does so well is capture a moment. And it's the moment that sort of almost gives you goosebumps. It takes you back to the play, but also takes you back on why you love that play. It's a moment of time that we can actually look at and relive, but also study it. And just looking at Joanne Woodward and Karen Allen there, not to mention Judith Ivey, not to mention all the others around me, it's really capturing that moment. So can we go back to Tobacco Road and take me through your decisions on what pictures to take and how to take it? And because they look not like your typical production photos. Each of them captures something special, and it also captures not just the actors acting, but also a mood and a feeling. And you look at any of these pictures and you get that feeling. So talk a little bit about, just a little bit, because we have a lot to go on, Tobacco Road.
The first thing I'll say is that what I do, what it turns out I do, is I am entrusted to preserve. I am a representationist. I take a presentation and I decide, what are we keeping? Because the rest of it's going to go in a warehouse or a dumpster. So that's my thought, is I'm an archivist. I want to get everything. And I walked into rehearsal that afternoon before we shot that evening, watched as much as I could, was blown away as soon as I saw that set. I said, oh my God, this is a gift. You know, incredible. And then all these skinny, starving Okies they found somewhere. You know, and then one day I'm in the green room and Pamela Peyton Wright opens her mouth and speaks, and I'm like, what? Tom Aldridge. I mean, it looked like they starved him for 3 months before they did their show. By the way, Erskine Caldwell was there on opening night for Tobacco Road, which was all the more amazing. Yeah. So anyway, I knew I had a gift in my hands. And I will say that one iconic photograph, the one that ends, of her dead on the road and Tom standing over her, I saw it happen during rehearsal. And I said, I've got to be 5 rows up, 10 feet over. And that's where I was.
During your career, especially your early career, you saw a lot of actors who would later become stars. Nathan Lane in Common Pursuit, Fran McDormand, and John Lithgow in the 70s. This was before your time, but the idea of, at Long Wharf, you could obviously see stars like Joanne Woodward and others, but you also saw people who would later become stars. While you were watching them, while you were photographing him, because nothing is more intimate than a photographer and its subject, could you tell that these people would, of course they're great actors, but really go on to become something special?
I can't claim that I had prescience about much of that, but I will say that Nathan Lane, I remember very well the response of the other actors in the room when there was a lull was, have we got a chance? Do we have any chance being noticed in this show because of him? So he was clearly somebody who got the spotlight. But nothing springs to mind. I will tell you one story, though, that's very dear to my heart about this kind of thing, of early work of people who go on to do terrific stuff. I got a call from a Olympia Dukakis for the penultimate show at her theater in Montclair, New Jersey. I don't know now, 30 years ago plus. And it was King Lear. And in King Lear was Philip Seymour Hoffman and a bunch of other wonderful names. But Philip Seymour Hoffman was an unknown to me. He was 19 years old, 20 years old, maybe getting his equity card. And Austin Pendleton decided that the Mad Tom scene should be played in full light with him naked, but for a baby blanket. And I mean a baby blanket this big. And I watched Philip Seymour Hoffman, pink pudgy Philip, out there acting his heart out for 20 minutes. And I got my car and I went home and I said, man, they are made of stuff I could never do that. I have so much respect for that guy. So that's the answer that I have.
Over the years, Long Wharf has brought in wonderful actors, and they also brought back time and time again actors. So even though it's not a repertory company, over the years, it sort of became an ad hoc repertory company. Pamela Payton Wright and Joyce and
Jack Gilpin and Annie McDonough.
I know. It's escaping my mind, but there's about a dozen or more than a dozen, say 24, that not only did were so right for the shows, but audiences got to see them grow and develop. And did you, because you saw them time and time again, build relationships? The difference between taking that very first picture of any of these repertory, semi-repertory people, and then later on, what were your relationships with these informal repertory group at Long Wharf Theater?
That's a really interesting question. It's a big question, too, because, I mean, part of the reason that I can even take the word relationship seriously about that is that it's been 40 years. You know, Saturday Night Live used to do this great satirical bit about paparazzi standing in line, and people would go by and they go like, yeah, we're like this. You know, whoever went by, Kim Kardashian, whoever it was, like, yeah, we're like this, because I'm out here snapping a picture. It's not a relationship. But repetitively, and after an actor sees your work, then it becomes, oh, it's you. Oh, I'm very glad that it's you. And I'm grateful for that photograph that you gave me from the last show, which, by the way, let me tell you, no greater icebreaker in the history of man than going to whoever your target is. You know, you're a fan of XYZ. You show up with a picture of them, you're in. If they look good, you're in. I remember I took pictures of Bob Marley to Toots Hibbert of Toots and the Maytals, and I just said, just take them to him. And I'm walking down the street, and this guy goes, hey, wait, Toots wants to talk to you. That's the way it works. So
talk a little bit about relationships with perhaps not just new actors, not just repertory actors, but stars who come to Long Wharf. Kathleen Turner, Al Pacino, Richard Dreyfuss. Did you have a different dynamic with those people? And do you have any stories about any of these stars?
Well, I can't redact the names now that you mentioned them. But I think the first time I worked with Al was on National Anthems. And in stage 2, you know, and that before they made a full production. And I went in and I remembered that just the whole thing was just super easy, and like everybody was very relaxed. There didn't seem to be any of this, you know, don't look at the talent, you know, none of that stuff.
None of the only shoot from my right side, my good side, anything like that?
None of the above. He let me take goofy pictures of him. That went swimmingly.
Did they have photo approval?
You know, I think he did, but who knows? But when he came back years later and did Huey, which, you know, turned into kind of my trademark photograph of him with the cigarette smoke. In the middle of that rehearsal afternoon, by the way, Arvin had dropped out of directing that only a week before because he got some other offer. So Al was directing himself. And we're through the whole afternoon, it's a tech, And I'm in there shooting and they're teching at the same time. And at a certain point, I remember he said, you know, it's kind of dark up here. You know, if you want to come up here and shoot. And I'm just, photographer, I'm talking to you. I said, Al, no one has invited me on stage in 15 years. I think I'll pass. And he continued through the afternoon. At the end, they're setting the denouement on the play with the last moment of it. And he's saying, how's this look? They shoot the dice, and the lights come down. And he says, how's it look? And nobody answers. He says, how's it, photographer, how's it look? I said, Al, I'm having trouble seeing your face. He goes, then we're on the right track. So that was my collaboration in directing.
Well,
with Al Pacino.
let me just mention a few more names, and if any anecdote pops up, the list goes on and on. Brian Dennehy, John Lithgow, of course, Judith Ivey, Martha Plimpton, Hal Holbrook, who's one of my favorites, Len Cariou, Frank Langella, Kathleen Chalfant, Julie Harris, Mary Alice, Jason Robards, Amy Irving.
I adore all of them. I respect all of them. The interactions that became special to me were with Hal Holbrook. Got to work with him several different times, he and Dixie.
What made that special for you?
Well, what you see is what you get. He's just as sweet as you think. He's just a nice guy, you know? And, I mean, people later told me Dixie was somewhere to the right of Attila the Hun, but she was real nice to me. Again, take them good-looking pictures, and they'll be real nice. Of all the people, you know, that you mentioned in that list, I gotta say John Lithgow. John Lithgow was the one that got away. He's the big kahuna I never got to photograph because I saw these amazing shows at Long Wharf. Requiem for a Heavyweight, and this one, Spoke Song. Spoke Song may be my favorite show.
Actually, Spoke Song was one of my first shows.
Maybe my favorite show of all time.
It was wonderful.
The guy was in such total command of the audience. I was in awe.
But
of
even
the
a
way
few
that
years before that, it was The Changing Room, which really launched or helped launch his career.
Sure.
And that moved on to New York, and from then on.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, we all know Lithgow can do anything, and we were just, super spoiled to have him on Long Wharf stages multiple times before the inevitable Hollywood. Come over here, you're gonna make a lot more money.
It's one thing to take pictures of actors, but you also have, you mentioned with Ethel Fugard, built relationships with writers themselves. And Long Wharf has had special relationships with Ethel Fugard, Arthur Miller, Donald Margulies, Simon Gray, the list goes on and on.
Absolutely.
And how are those pictures and how are that relationship different?
Well, again, that list that you just mentioned, I mean, come on. I worked with every great living American playwright. It's insane. I shot a premiere of a Tennessee Williams piece that had never been pulled out of a drawer after he died. But I shot a premiere of Arthur Miller's. I shot premieres of Simon Gray's, etc. That was an incredible thrill, incredible gift. I talked to Arthur 2 sentences, shook his hand a couple of times, but Inga sat next to me through an entire rehearsal, and we chatted all through it. That was amazing. Inga Morath.
Was that intimidating at all?
Internationally famous photographer wife, who actually supplanted me for the New York show. At the last minute, I was supposed to shoot it in New York. At the last minute, they said, no, you're not doing it, Inga is. So, okay, I'll do that. I accept it. But yes, when Arthur Miller turned around and shook my hand, I said, you're here, man. You have arrived. Remember, maybe I told you this story, but I was avoiding studying for a French AP test at prep school one day, and I thought, I'll do anything rather than look at this damn book. And I just pulled something off the shelf, and it was the first edition of Death of a Salesman. And I read it from cover to cover, and I was absolutely floored. And this is a 15-year-old or 16-year-old with no reason to expect that this will be fun. Death of a Salesman, it's just one of those names. It's just one of those things that hangs around. But I was riveted. And then, fast forward, and I'm actually talking to these people. I mean, it's insane. It's insane.
Long Wharf itself has a setting that's unusual. It's in the, obviously, it used to be at the meat packing plant. We all remember the long walkway from one end to the other. As I remember some of your photos and some of mine over the years as well, that runway has been a setting for quite a few of those, as well as the lobby, as well as the entire environment. Did the place itself influence you at all in what you...
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I started to haunt New Haven was when Jenny and I moved down from Massachusetts. We'd been living in Williamstown for years. I went to UMass and she went home. She went to live in Woodbridge for a few years and then we got an apartment. But every weekend I would come down from UMass and we would do something. Probably movies, back in the day. Remember that? We all went to the movies 9 times a week. So we would do that, or we'd go to a play. And she absolutely introduced me to Long Wharf. First play there was in '75. It was called On the Inside, On the Outside. It had Frank Converse in it. It was one of the slew of, we do it better than the Irish. We do it better than the Brits. That Long Wharf was... They had a lock on that.
Do you have a favorite show that you saw at Long Wharf?
I'm sorry?
Not a favorite show, not that you shot, but that you actually, maybe
Well,
that's unfair, maybe
of the
few.
shows
A few
of that decade before, I would say the one that sticks with me more than anything is Streamers.
Oh my God. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was in the front row. And at a certain point, Clifton James was dragging his blood bag over my toes. And I was going like, David Rabe, you and I have got a lot to talk about, man, because you just traumatized the hell out of me. That show, I mean, there's a line in that play that says, please stop stabbing me.
That play gets often sort of, when we ask folks, who've been coming to Long Wharf Theater from the beginning, like, what's that favorite show? Streamers is often the one that is so it's
It's an incredible show.
I just want to slip this in because it's sort of a rarity at Long Wharf, because it only lasted a week, or Janice, you might be more familiar with how many performances of Mike Nichols and Elaine May in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And I happened to see it early in the run because it didn't last that long. Not because they shut it down for illness, but it was a very, very famous production for those who are lucky enough to have seen it. Do you have any? I saw some of those pictures of Elaine May as Martha, and
Those are not me.
those aren't yours.
No, I did miss that. I missed Nichols and May.
Oh, okay.
I did.
Oh well.
oh, wow.
I was
But
hoping for an anecdote.
I caught Winston Schonen and John Connie doing Waiting for Godot. I mean, come on. Equally worthy in my recollection. That was an amazing performance.
One of the things that you shared with us again when we were preparing for today, Charlie, is when you look at the pictures you've taken in terms of capturing the history of Long Wharf, the images are so arresting, and there's so much emotional truth that is sort of coming through the pictures. And can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to accomplish that in terms of moving from setups, and if you can explain to the audiences what that is versus the practice of the actors actually running the scene.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. This is my favorite thing, really. And if I take, I probably should have prefaced everything I say here today by saying that, my native Midwestern Lutheran modesty has been overcome by steady neglect. So, what was that you asked me? No, seriously, tell me.
How do you find those moments? Obviously, there are setups that you have to do,
yeah.
but some of these
Yeah.
pictures aren't set
Yeah.
up.
It's
Some
It's like
of the
the scenes are
pictures-
actually running.
Yeah, no, this is why I had to preface it, because I'm damn proud. I'm damn proud of the fact that in the early days, when I'll never forget this one, second show, The Crucible, and it's 11:30, and they've put all the actors back into, those were thick costumes, and they're all full of sweat, you know, and they put them back in their Act One costumes at 11:45 and say, find an emotional moment. And meanwhile, the director and everybody else has left. And it's Charlie with Frank Converse and whomever else. And I remember trying, like, what am I going to do? How do I make this work? Oh, my God. And the tension is building. And finally, Frank mutters from under his beard. He says, take the goddamn picture. And I said, that's what setups are going to be like from now on. We got to get rid of this shit. And I'm grateful to say that I think here's what I brought. Now, you know, my generation perhaps, but I'm just going to talk about me. That's what the preface about ignoring the modesty was. I grew up in a dramatic household. I was made very adult-worthy at 5 or 6 years old. I was expected to carry my side of the conversation from 7 or 8. And my sensitivity to the emotional tenor of a room, to the direction that things were going, to the way that adults speak, to the tenor in the voices, to the flicker of their eyes, that was survival. That was a survival thing. I learned it, and I was real good at it. And it didn't play out in a natural way until I got into theater. And one day, Joe Dowling, wonderful, wonderful Joe Dowling, once director
Run
of
the Guthrie
Dublin's
Theater for many
Gate
years in
Theater,
Minneapolis.
and then he was the director of the Guthrie, and I knew him at the Guthrie. And one day, he was on his way out. We were having our final drink at the Guthrie. I remember this. And he said, Charlie, I watched you in rehearsal this afternoon, and it seemed to me that you knew the actors' expressions before they did. I saw you being ready for them before they did. And I just got to say, I will take that. I have radar. It was instilled early on for survival. And it's worked real well for me.
Now, Charlie, Long Wharf has now moved on to different locations, and a wonderful photo that I saw out there was from a view from the bridge.
Not mine.
Still, if you had to do these types of, you've worked at other theaters, many other theaters, and many different types of locations, how do you approach situations where you're not familiar with the setting and making it work and making it a Charlie Erickson photo?
You know, having never been skunked, I've never had a situation I couldn't deal with. So I'm not worried. This is a challenge. It's like, okay, how are we going to make this work? You guys did what? You put 4 tech tables there? Are you out of your minds? Find a way to make it work.
But where you did make it work, and where the very first show that we did, where we embraced the model of bringing theater to the community and performing in different spaces, was asking Kathleen Chalfant to return. And we did Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking in people's homes and gathering spaces. And Charlie did get to shoot that show. Can you share a little bit more about what that experience was? Because I think, and also just the wonderful bridge, right, of going from wit to this, and to see really the evolution of an actor, of a great actor.
I'm so glad you asked me about Kathleen. Yeah. People ask everyone in a position of, you know a whole lot of things, who's the best, what's the best, who's your favorite. Those stories are so hard to answer, ever. But I will say that since day one, Kathleen Chalfant has been in the absolute pantheon of actors that I've worked with. This is a woman who can do no wrong in my experience. And in '97, Long Wharf premiered Wit. And, the Pulitzer Prize winning one-off play by Margaret Edson. I don't know that she ever wrote another one. But this was an incredibly affecting play. And at the end of the play, the cancer patient English teacher, played by Kathleen Chalfant, steps off her hospital bed into a spot of white light that grows in intensity so that your eyes, you can't even look. She strips off her gown and disintegrates into white light, and then blackout. My mom died of cancer 2 years, practically to the day, before that shoot. And I shelved it. You know, you do. You deal the way you deal. I mean, I was older. Nothing was a surprise. But oh my God, suddenly theater hit Charlie in the middle of a job. And I became a puddle. I sat in that chair sobbing. And thankfully, it was the end of the play. So they had a couple of minutes. But, you know, the lights stayed down, and I'm there like, pull your act together, Charlie. And suddenly, I feel the enveloping arms of a dear friend, Annie Keefe, behind me and whispering in my ear, "Are you ready to proceed?" And I said, "Yeah, if you're leading this show, of course, I am ready to proceed." So that was a remarkable moment of theater actually making its mark through the lens, through my other responsibilities. I'm very often in Zen flow when I shoot. I'm connecting enough to hear the score, but don't ask me about the libretto. I know the emotions, but don't ask me about the details. So in an instance like this where it really hits you, I was devastated. And then Kathy comes back many times. She's been here many times. And I was so pleased that she came back to do the Joan Didion piece, the Year of Magical Thinking. I adore her. She's wonderful.
Going back to Frank Langella, not Frank personally, but the idea of actors who just say, you know, is this enough? Is this enough? Those are the actors who really aren't looking into the future, because here we have these incredible photos from these incredible productions, and this is what we come back to. So however long these actors had to work with Charlie to get these moments, these are the memories that we have to remain and to study and to go back to those productions. So I would imagine most of these actors knew that, or do you think it was just another gig for them? Did they have a sense that this is what's going to be remaining after our production is over?
Well, again, I guess, you know, only with the benefit of thousands of shows and repeated elbow rubbings, you know, I know that the predominant response, I've never gotten the opposite response. It's always like, "Oh, it's you, Charlie, thank God." I get that tons of times. I've never gotten the, "Oh, it's Charlie? What's he doing
I
here?"
imagine
I
they're
just get
very
that.
grateful.
Actually, I get, "It's Charlie, we're not ready. What is he doing here? Why does he not come back tomorrow?"
Which is a testament, that the fact that actors are saying, "Oh, it's like with excitement, right?" It's a testament to your that there was a trust.
Trust,
which I think
and it's super important with actors.
yes,
Super important.
absolutely.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, who hasn't felt that? Who hasn't been surprised by a photograph somebody took, said, "Here's a great picture of you," and you go like, "Oh my God, I look like that from that angle?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, having a photographer to continue decade after decade, there is this sense of community, and that's what Long Wharf has had with its actors, with its managing directors, with its artistic directors, and of course with its staff. So in a way, not in a way, you are part of that New Haven Long Wharf family.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
We are going to open it up to some questions, but I have just two questions that I want to ask, just to sort of zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
Share more about how the two of you met and your relationship, because I think you are both cultural historians in your respective fields. There's a deep respect and friendship here. So reflect for us a little bit about your relationship.
Well, as a young journalist, I made a point to make best friends with photographers. And I was fortunate enough to, especially starting at the Journal Courier in New Haven, which I think is the best New Haven paper ever, I worked with some brilliant photographers, and I knew that if I had wonderful photographs like Charlie takes, my article would get great coverage, people would read the story, and it would get great play. So I made it a point to make friends with every single photographer I could possibly have. And I forget actually the first time, but it was probably 40 years ago.
David Mayhew, is there somebody here who can shed light on that?
So it was probably one of those, I came in 77, and I always remember, Charlie has always been in my life. So, but it's my habit of getting to be close friends with great photographers. So it's simple as that. It's really self-interest.
Yes. What about for you? What can you share about your
I
friendship?
can't recall all the times that we, elbow rubbed at all the great openings. It was mostly Long Wharf openings.
Mostly
Definitely.
Long Wharf,
I mean,
okay.
countless.
Yes.
Numbers of them.
Yes.
And
But knowing,
yeah, I don't know. He's just been a fixture on the scene like me for forever.
I love
And
it.
occasionally Frank will drop something that I will see, and I'll make a note. I go like, "You sat next to Paul McCartney, and you didn't tell me about that. You knew Elton John before he had hair. What is going on?"
Yeah.
This guy knows everything.
Yeah, excellent. My last question before we open it up to the audience. It is not lost on me, and I've said this before when we've had other kind of community gatherings before a show begins, when I do the curtain speech, that I believe the world is very much on fire. And it is not lost on me that we get to be here in community having this conversation in this space, reflecting on your legacy, reflecting on your contributions also, Frank. And now is the time, I think, more than ever, that we need community and we need stories and we need the American theater. But the American theater is also evolving, right? We're in a place of evolution. And so as you, in your respective fields, think about the future and the importance of the work that we do as storytellers, and the future for Long Wharf, what do you think about? Where do you think we're going? What is your hope for the future of the American theater and Long Wharf?
Wow, that's huge. I will say that many, many times in the hundreds and hundreds of shows that I've sat as an audience member in, I've recognized that the importance, the value of what I was doing was that I was in a communal moment. I knew that I was in a hive mind. I knew that I felt the emotion of everyone else in that room. And we were linked. And we were all focused on this comedy tragedy, on whatever it was that was in front of us. And we were linked through an emotion, not a word. This was not linguistic. And that is very different from the way that people take in most entertainment these days. That's for damn sure. And it was even true in the movie houses. And like I alluded to before, I mean, I saw 3,000 movies. I saw so many. Well, that's all we did was go to the movies. And I recall one of my greatest moments in a crowd experiencing anything in my life. They had a sneak preview of Alien at Orange Cinema One Too Many. And we're sitting there, and 30 minutes into Alien, that thing popped out of that guy's chest. And the roof popped off of the Cinema 1 through 74. That was amazing.
That's amazing. I love what
I love that stuff, and I do kind of like, I'm sorry if that attraction, the very attraction, the feeling of, I'm going to go where a lot of other people are going, and we're going to experience something together. I hope that doesn't, go away
Yes.
as the competition for eyeballs, et cetera, all the many competitions that go on.
Yes.
We all know that physically assembling creates a new dynamic that you are not in control. And, you know, they've been depending on that in religion forever, right? You
Yes.
walk into church and everything's different. Well, say in the 70s when I walked into Long Wharf lobby, everything started to change pretty quick.
Yes.
And when you sat down in that audience and
Yes.
they were respectful and they were quiet,
Yes.
holy moly,
Yes.
you were in a
Communal moment.
communal event. And you would take at least as much of that feeling away as any narrative sense of what it was you watched, or your ability to tell the story later, or he did this or that. No. More it was like, yeah, wow, or that was spooky, or, you know?
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
So I love that.
That's excellent. Beautiful.
I-
What
I
about
was
for you?
always-
And-
I was always aware that New Haven, especially, was a very special theater place, and that I was living in a very special era. I never took it for granted because Long Wharf was at the forefront of the American regional theater movement, which was transformative. Hundreds and hundreds of theaters sprung up almost overnight, starting in the early to mid-'60s, and continued on. And with the dynamic of Yale Repertory Theater and so many other theaters around Connecticut, it was this great cultural moment. And, you know, it's in danger. And you can take a number of attitudes. You can either be one of despair or one of hope. Hope is, in this case, is a little bit more challenging than despair. But I think theaters are taking serious looks at themselves and trying to figure new ways to survive. They also have to come to reality with some business models that perhaps were there at one moment and they no longer exist. And they have to perhaps collaborate more, they have to partner more, they have to reinvent themselves, but so do the audiences. So it's a combination of a journey that everyone is going through together. And where this is going, I wish I knew. I've been doing this for almost 50 years, and 50 of the 60 years at Long Wharf, so I don't know what my math is. But I'm not sure. I wish I could say this is what American theater should be doing. I think theaters in Connecticut and elsewhere are trying their best to figure out new ways. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they have to take a real reality check and look at their financials to see if they can do what they can do. I remember interviewing Michael Kaiser from the Kennedy Center, and this was around 2008 when there was the financial crisis. And I asked him what theaters should do, because 2008 was a horrible, horrible year. He says theaters should not contract, because you can reduce yourself out of business. You can go from 5 character shows to 3 character shows to solo shows. He would advise theaters to do something dramatic, go big, get audiences excited about something, give them a reason to go back to the theater, to rally to the theater's defense. And I think we should not live in fear. I think we should live in hope and turn to a different generation to reinvent things and find their own cultural moment.
Yes, wonderful. Powerful stuff there. Thank you so much. That's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I feel like what I'm hearing is also a call for courage. That's actually and
medication.
Yeah, and medication. Yes. But I really appreciate what you're both saying, because I think it speaks to Long Wharf's legacy. That Long Wharf Theater has always been a company out in front. Long Wharf Theater has been a company that has led with courage and imagination. And I feel like sometimes we have an imagination problem in terms of how to think about what the future can look like. So I'm really, really proud. And by having you all here, it's a testament that Long Wharf Theater, as we continue to step outside the box, as we continue to imagine a new way forward, that the possibilities are endless. So thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting this event. We're gonna open it up for some questions, and then we're gonna do a toast, y'all. Lindy, do you want the mic?
I don't think I need it.
You don't think you need it? Okay.
And thank you, no, we do not have an edifice complex. Charlie, you are naturally, or maybe as a result of having to perform for your family in groups, a natural actor. But I will say, I'm fascinated that even at age 15, the first thing you thought to pick up was a play to read. Do you know why?
I think it was. It was a moment of ripening. It was like too green an idea.
There was already Catcher in the Rye.
I'd say again.
I said there was already Catcher in the Rye, but
Yeah, and I'm sure I had read that before, but I believe, I remember when Jenny took me to my first ballet. We were in Bologna, in Italy, and I was a deadhead. She was like dragging me. She dragged me. And we're in the middle of the third act, and Carlo Fracci's got me in tears, man. I mean, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. So, all I can say is your readiness for it determines, some of the effect of it. I don't know. What was specifically the question?
Why a play? Well, you picked up a play.
you are an actor.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Why didn't you?
yeah, that's why I thought of the ballet, because it's something I didn't think I would like. And I picked up that play just because I think I scanned whatever was racked up next to me, and I said, I don't recognize any. I'm going to grab this Death of a Salesman thing and see what this is all about.
We probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. I'm mindful of Mike. Go for it.
Thank you, Jacob. And thank you, Charlie. So I usually don't like production photos because they look dead, but I like yours a lot because they look very alive. So I wanted to ask you, this is kind of an inversion. What do you think a theater person, an actor, a director, can learn about theater by looking at your body of work and the perspective that you've gleaned over the years as a photographer?
Good one. Well, I'll tell you, it actually is very simple. The secret, there is no secret, the secret to theater photography is eye contact. That's all it is. Eye
Contact. Okay.
Your eyes contacting the picture, but most important, what are those actors doing with their eyes? If there's no eye contact, if there's no highlight, if their eyes are in shadow, unless they're mourning, you don't have communication. It's always about that. And every time that and thankfully, these moments winnowed to nothing mostly, but any time that I did get into a moment where, can we recreate that? I say, look at each other like you really do when you talk. The person speaking is who you look at. Don't look at the camera, don't look around the room. Be natural. You don't have to tell people to do that when they're acting. You don't have to tell them when they're in the middle of a scene. They're only going to do what their character wants them to do. The minute you pull them out of that, and especially that continuum, it took 6 minutes to get here to the moment where I'm ready to, okay? Which is why I started the thing by saying at 11:45, there's no way you ask someone who spent 6 minutes to get there to do it in 2 seconds. It does not work. And if it does, it's super performative and fake as it can be. I hate setups. I hate them. And they say nothing to me about drama. They say nothing to me about. They say budget. They say costume, but that's it. That's the end of it.
Yeah, excellent.
So I'm real happy I helped jettison the need for it. Most of the theaters I've worked for.
Excellent. I think we can start bringing out the bubbly.